about how the story gets longer, and so kind of fleshing out the things that are most important to me that I want to share, and kind of focusing on those, especially with the 1 hour session. So I try to be kind of leave some things that are sort of superfluous, and focus on the things that I want to, the message that I want to get out there. And the message, in a nutshell, is that as hard and trying as these parenting, caregiver, healthcare professionals, as challenging as this job can be sometimes, it also comes with great reward. And I have learned, I always say I've learned more from my son than I will ever teach him. I was one person when he came into my life, and I'm, as we all are as we age, but I'm a different person now, and to a great extent that's because of him. Ryan, it was practically a newborn. Well, he was a newborn when he came into my life, because I knew his biological parents, and he's been living with me off and on since birth, but full time since he was a toddler. And like I said, he's almost 28 now, so it's been a journey. And sometimes the nice thing about connecting with other people is that we often feel like our experience is unique to us, and that other people, that it's different for other people. And it's always, every situation is unique, but there are so many common things that come up, that it's important to know that other people are out there dealing with what you're dealing with. And we get together to talk about these things, and of course we want to highlight the positive and the good things, but it's hard work, and as all parenting is hard work, but it's with kind of an added layer of complication. And as I sit here with so many people supportive of what I've done and where we are now, I am here to tell you that A, it hasn't been easy, and B, it's there are days, there have been days in the last 20 some years that I felt like I wasn't qualified to look after a plant, much less a complicated little boy. So it's with absolute humility that I speak about this, and there's so much good to share, and often some trials and hardships as well. So when Ryan was born, or when he was small, most of his issues, for lack of a better word, were health related. He was diagnosed with failure to thrive, and we spent a lot of time, excuse me, spent a lot of time at the hospital, at the doctors, at the emergency room. He had ear issues, and his immune system was struggling, and so that was kind of the focus. And none of the behavioral issues had really come to light because he was too young. So keeping in mind that when Ryan came to me, I knew the term back then was FAS, more so than FAS and FAE rather than FASD. But I knew what it was. I knew what caused it, but I didn't really know. Beyond that, I didn't really know very much about it. So it's been on the job training, so to speak. And I guess the first kind of indication, really, we kind of like isolate our worlds and create, you do, as all parents do, you do these minor little adjustments to the idiosyncrasies of your children, that you don't, modifications, whatever you want to call them, that you don't even realize that you've done, until the day comes that you are now, when your child enters school and you're turning them over to other people and sort of sharing that time with them. And that was kind of a real eye opener for Ryan, because we had this very insulated world. And when things started to kind of turn around between 4 and 5 for him health wise, he was starting to gain a little bit of weight and his health was getting better. I thought, oh, we've really turned a corner here, and probably smooth sailing from here on in. Anyways, when Ryan entered school, it quickly became apparent that the behavioral issues and challenges became more apparent. And I realized that I had my hands full. And I remember one day, Ryan had been sick for a few days, hadn't gone to school, and I took him back on the day he was well enough to go. And we were hanging up coats and getting all his stuff into his little cubby at the back. And I heard two little girls talking, and one of them said, Ryan's back. And I was shocked, hurt, like just a gamut of emotions. I went home and I cried. All we ever want for our kids really is for them to be happy, for them to have friends and be loved. And so this kind of slap in the face that maybe that wouldn't be his reality was scary to me. And so during the time that he was at school, 2.5 hours or whatever it is, I was mad, I was sad, I was like just this gamut of emotions. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, pissed off, like, well, these little girls, blah, 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 whatever. I thought it was nothing good. And by the time I picked Ryan up from school, a seed of a thought was starting to go through my mind that, first of all, they call FASD kind of the invisible disability, because quite often people that have it or that are living with it are everything to this sort of the unprofessional or untrained eye looks normal. And Ryan was cute and adorable and had all the kind of typical facial features, which are often make children look almost elf-like, which is even cuter. There's this expectation of normalcy. And just to give you an example, I mean, if you're in the workplace or something and somebody comes in, rolls in a wheelchair, it's like, oh, okay, we're going to need some special considerations for this person. If somebody walks in that has, say, Down syndrome, where it's like there's a visual component, you're going to say, oh, okay, this person needs some special considerations. But when kids look exactly like, or for the most part, like their schoolmates, then we have an expectation of normalcy. And that is, that to me, that is the crux of this whole thing, because Ryan was going into school, never had been discussed really. I mean, the school knew because we were applying at that time for funding and so forth, but it wasn't something that we were broadcasting out to the kids. And it occurred to me on that day that in the absence of, with children, with adults, with all of us, in the absence of any information to the contrary, we make assumptions. And so the assumption of these little girls was that this was like a normal classmate and who just couldn't seem to behave himself, or that had some behavioral issues. And so it occurred to me that it maybe was time to start having conversations about this, specifically FASD, but in general, just differences. And so a seed of a thought was born with me. And I thought, well, the best place to start is for me to find some kind of a book or literature, something that I can arm myself with and go into the school and talk to the teachers, talk to the kids about what it means to have someone like Ryan amongst them. And I couldn't find anything. I looked at some books most of the literature that was out at that time, there's so much more now, and it's so much more helpful, but there was really nothing that kind of said exactly what I wanted to say. There were a few that came close, but um, just a few things that just were not my message and what I wanted to say. So then I thought to myself, well, I know what I want to say, and with kids, it's easier if you put it in the form of a story. So I started to create a story, which has since been published in a book called But Michael Makes Me Laugh. And really, that I think that when I was talking to Andrea, she said that a link would be provided for anyone that's interested in getting copies of the book. It's not FASD 101. It's not the complete guide to FASD. It's a conversation starter, and which is what it was intended to be. And it has started a lot of conversations throughout the school system and the healthcare system, and just with families in general, to better understand and to share thoughts and ideas. And I'm just forever grateful for that. But before it was the book that is available now, it was a story that was written out, and I contacted Ryan's school and said, like, would you be amenable to me coming in and reading a story to the kids to help them better understand Ryan and what having him in their class means? And they were agreeable. So my sister, who is the artist in the family, I called her and I said, listen, I'm going to be telling this story to kids, and kids need pictures. So can you draw me some pictures? And my sister drew the beautiful pictures that are in the book now. And we had a coloring party and colored the pictures, and eventually that was made into a book. But when I went to Ryan's school, it was just in a binder. And the night before I was ready to go into the school, it sounds foolish as I say it now, but it occurred to me that I had never spoken. I'm armed and ready to go and talk to the kids in Ryan's class about him and about FASD, but I had never spoken to him about it. And so the night before I was going to school, I said to Ryan, I'm going to read a story to your class tomorrow. And that was basically the extent of what I said. I said, I'm going to read a story to your class tomorrow. I'd like to read the story to you. And he was a little bit perturbed that it wasn't like a traditional book, that it was this kind of makeshift binder. But I said, I want to read you the story as your bedtime story. So I read the story to Ryan, and at that time I had the book is essentially about Ryan, but I changed the name to Michael instead of Ryan, because at that point I was really unsure about kind of the level of exposure that I wanted to create for him. So anyways, I said, I'm going to read you this story. So I read the story to Ryan, and when I was finished, I said to him, what do you think? And he said, I think that story is about me. I think I have FAS, which is the term that was used at that time, because the book was published in 2003. And to say that I was shocked was a giant understatement, because he was 5 at the time, and it boggled my mind that just from, that he was that self-aware, and that he, without any direct prompting on my part, he understood that this was that I was describing him in the story. And so I said, actually, yes, it is. And you have FASD. And we had a conversation about that was kind of age appropriate for him. And again, it was a conversation starter. We've had hundreds of conversations since over the years. And I mean, it's like talking to your kids about this is like talking to your kids about, sex ed or birds and bees. It's not one conversation. It's not an event. It's a process, and it's a series of conversations. and it's keeping that communication open. So I said to Ryan, how do you feel about me coming and reading the story to your class tomorrow? And he was fine with it. He had no objections. And so the next day we went into the school and I read the story to Ryan's class. And again, the introduction that I was given to the kids is like, Ryan's mom has come to read us a story today. That was it. So I finished reading the story and I asked the kids what they thought of it. And one of the little girls in the class said, I think that that is a story about Ryan. And so mind blown again. And I can't stress this enough when I tell people that, you know, children are so open and so receptive to new information, and educating kids at immediately about differences, about how we're all a little bit different and we all need special considerations. But for the purpose of this conversation, we're talking about Ryan and we're talking about FASD, but you can insert whatever name and whatever neurodiversity that you want into that sentence. The philosophy kind of works across the board. And this is what I mean when I say that I was one person when I met Ryan, and I'm a different person now because I understand more. I'm much more understanding about other people's differences. And I also understand that I too learn, I have a specific way that I learn that is different from other people, and just kind of understanding that we need different things. I mean, some people are visual learners, some people are hands-on, some people are book learners, and so we all learn and um, receive and retrieve information in a variety of ways. And so makes a lot of sense to me to be open to that. Ryan's class and I had a conversation after. I said, yes, this is a story about Ryan, and Ryan has FASD. And we had a conversation that blew my mind because the kids were, there was this shift and it was almost immediately, and it was almost immediate. Instead of being like, oh, Ryan's a brat, or, you know, Ryan's a troublemaker, it's like, oh, we get it. So he's different. So he does things differently. And kind of the girls kind of became little mothers that were kind of helping to nudge him back into place. And the boys were, you know, able to set boundaries with him and help him and cue him. You know, Ryan, we're getting ready for gym class, so get your stuff together, and really build this little circle around him of support, circles of support, that was just amazing to watch. And I had opportunities to go into other schools and talk to other kids, schools where there were children with FASD, schools where there were children with other neurodiversity. And I remember talking to a foster mom of a child in one of the schools that had invited me to come and read the book and talk to the kids. And she said, I said, are you comfortable like educating the school and the kids and so forth that your child that's in your care has FASD? And she said, absolutely not. I don't want my child to be labeled. I just want to, like, you can read the story, you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I don't want the kids to know that Bobby, or whatever her child's name was, is living with FASD. And I obviously would honor that request, but I asked her to kind of rethink her philosophy on it, because I said that if you wouldn't dream of sending an epileptic child out into the world without making sure that the people around them knew that they were epileptic or diabetic, or insert, you know, whatever challenge you want. And in my opinion, I didn't think that sharing that information would create a label. I felt like it would tear down the labels, because again, in the absence of information to the contrary, the labels are going to be brat, troublemaker, whatever. And so this is removing that stigma, and we wouldn't feel that I don't know if the word is shame or just reluctance if it was something else. So I think that we need to, I think it's really key for us to kind of get away from this. And I have never, ever in Ryan's life played like the blame game. I am nothing but grateful to both of Ryan's biological parents are dead now, but I never was finger pointing or shaming or in any way making him feel anything negative towards them. It it is certainly believed that both of Ryan's biological parents also had FASD themselves, and so that's kind of a generational thing. And this would have been back in the day that the diagnostic tools weren't available, and definitely the support wasn't available for them. So they grew up in a very different world than the world that Ryan is growing up in or has grown up in that there was very little support for them, and they spent their lives being a problem, instead of being there being an explanation or something that we could understand. So if Ryan is the poster child for the benefits and of early diagnosis, intervention, support, community support, family support, then they would be kind of the poster child for what could happen or possible outcome without those things. And so both of those experiences really kind of drive home the point of the difference that we can make just through diagnostics and support and understanding. And Ryan's mom, being a biological mom, being someone that likely had FASD herself, and something happened. She created a situation that I mean, there's no other way of saying it, that she was responsible for this. But she also, in a world where so many people deny, and at that time, parental disclosure was huge in getting a diagnosis for FASD. She was very forthcoming about those things, and so yes, she played a role in causing this, but she definitely played a role in allowing and helping Ryan to have a diagnosis, which opened doors for support for him that wouldn't have been open. And that to me was like a really brave thing to do, because it couldn't have been easy. So, I have nothing but kudos to her and to them for creating this beautiful human being, and for being brave enough to share the information that was necessary for him to have a diagnosis. Ryan's story is long, and I tried to kind of extrapolate the parts that are most helpful. But one of the things that I can't say enough about is that, and Andrea and I were having a conversation the other day about advocacy, and it was a very different world when Ryan turned 18, because I had been aggressively, for lack of a better word, advocating for him his whole entire life, for funding in the schools, for awareness in our community, for awareness and understanding in our family. I had been doing this for so long, and I'm jumping ahead a bit, but I'll circle back at some point. But when Ryan turned 18, it was like a huge reality check for me, because I couldn't make a call and advocate for him. I remember Ryan and I'm proud to say that Ryan graduated from grade 12 in a mainstream school program. It wasn't a modified program, and we're so proud of him for that. But when Ryan graduated in June, but he turned 18 in May. So there was a school, the school sends home. This is like pretty common for kids to turn 18 during the school year. So they send home a letter for you and the student to sign, just basically saying that for the remainder of the school term, for all intents and purposes, you're still mom and you still have a vote and a say, and the student has to agree to it. But school, so my point being, school wasn't really the big issue, because he had signed the papers and we had all agreed that I was able to step forward for him until the school year ended, rather than when he turned 18. But in terms of any other agencies, trying to find work, trying to find programs and everything, that all stops when they turn 18. And yes, there are special things that can be done to allow you to advocate, but my point is that it's not automatic. And so you have to fight for it, and you have to push for it. I hate using the word fight because it makes it sound like everything is a big fight, but you have to be a strong advocate for that, because they need it, and he needed it, and he still needs it to some extent. And so it's important to, if I were going to, tell anybody, things to sort of put in place in moving towards adulthood, is to make sure that you're able to advocate for them. And then the second piece to that, which is even more important than the advocacy, is teaching them to advocate for themselves. And that is a life skill that many people, neurodiverse or not, don't have, is the ability to advocate for themselves. So I can't stress enough that it's important to advocate for your child, but I'm not going to be here forever, and nor do I want to always be in that role. It's important that he be able to do that for himself. And so we have, during the last few years, Ryan has, and keep in mind that you kind of have to look at these the timeline a little bit differently, because we're hardwired our whole lives, that 18 is this springboard to adulthood, and you're an adult and go. And the reality of that, I know tons of young people that are still at home with their parents because they're going to university or because they're struggling, and they still need parental support. So 18 may be a magic number in terms of legality, but it definitely isn't a magic number for most people of independent living. And I remember years and years ago, and I always make the disclaimer that I don't even know if this is like a true, I don't even know if this was a true statement then, or if it holds true today. But I remembered reading something that the average age of independent living for people with FASD was 28. And so that's kind of always been a magic number in my head. And it allowed me to kind of shift that that mentality of like, you're 18, go do your life. You're an adult now. And Ryan will be 28 next month. And he was finally able, after a struggle, he was able to secure employment a little over 2 years ago. He was part of a program that helped people with neurodiversities to find employment. And I think the program is called REES, REES. Can't remember what it stands for. Probably some of you are familiar with it. And they had set up a sort of a mock interview, because I think they reach out to companies and kind of try and find out their readiness or willingness to hire people that have some complications. And so It was kind of a mock interview, but it was set up like a real interview. And he interviewed and he got the job. And it was like they said, you have a 2-week trial as part of like the Reese program, and we'll kind of see how that goes. And so he was going to start the job on, I think it was a Wednesday or a Thursday. And then the beginning of the next week, like the full week, that would begin the 2-week sort of trial. And so he worked the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or maybe it was just Thursday, Friday, but he came in on Monday and his boss called him into the office, which he thought was like, oh God, here we go. Okay, what's happening? And they said, we've seen enough. You are doing great, and we want to offer you full-time employment and like as a member of our team, apart from the Reese program. So that was like so exciting for us because it was huge. It was absolutely huge. Ryan, I swear his walk, the way he stood, the way he talked, everything changed. And it was because he was literally stepping onto the platform of adulthood. And so I'm just so proud of him, and he is doing well in his job, and he has they have like an investment program it's kind of like a company pension. You contribute and they contribute, and so that makes me feel good because he's moving towards financial independence. And it gives me so much hope because I think about Ryan navigating a world without me someday. And I want to make sure that he's ready to do that, and that he's financially able to do that, but also emotionally, and is able to advocate for himself. Because I've gone from a bus driver for his life, for his world, to a front seat passenger, to a back seat passenger, and now I'm kind of a spectator. And I want to have that peace of mind for myself that he's going to be okay. And we're definitely moving in that direction. I'm being mindful of time here, but I have sometimes at these sessions, we will actually read the book, But Michael Makes Me Laugh, together, as kind of a conversation starter. But I don't think that we really have time to do that today. And so the only thing that I will say is that I think a link is going to be provided. It's a great way to start conversations with people. What was very interesting to me when the book was eventually published and made available is the conversations that it was able to start with adults too, because it was a book that was written for a kindergarten class. But really the message of the book is that we are all different, and we all need different considerations. And by kind of being open and understanding that people are very different, and just accepting that and working within that is huge in the way that the way that I interact. I manage a hotel for a living, and I work with a lot of different people of different age groups, but I work with a lot of young people. And just me being aware that people, I remember one time I was interviewing somebody for a housekeeping position, and I had another person, another manager there with me, and afterwards I said I wasn't a fan of her. And this lady that was sitting in on the interview, she said, "Yeah, but Lori, you're not interviewing her to be interviewed. You're interviewing her to be a housekeeper. So don't look at her ability to interview, because not everyone interviews well, but does she have the ability to do the job?" And I was like, aha, yes, that is the key. And so moving forward, when I talk to people, it's like, the interview is like the necessary evil to meet people and to, you've got 15-20 minutes, whatever, to make a determination about them. But really, at the end of the day, the question is are they able to do the job? And so quite often people with FASD, definitely Ryan, may not interview well. And so he was fortunate to have that kind of buffer with the program that he was in, that the people that he was talking to kind of understood and had kind of adjusted their expectation based on that. And he is thriving in his job. He's doing really well. Getting back to Ryan being little, when Ryan was going from, when I was a kid, it was grade 9 was the springboard to high school. High school was 10, 11, 12. And then somewhere along the way, it changed to 9, 10, 11, 12 was high school. So Ryan was in grade 8 and he was getting ready to go into grade 9. And they do like a high or junior high school grad for the kids. And so we went to this grad, and when I got home, I have a writer's heart. I solve problems by writing. I love writing things. And when I came home from this graduation, I literally was like pushing everything out of the way, wanted to get to the computer, wanted to write down to tell my story of my evening, because I just thought this story and this particular evening completely encapsulated a day in the life of somebody with FASD. It was like, this is the story. It's in a nutshell. It's this roller coaster of emotions and expectations and so forth. And so I wrote this story that I'm going to bring up on my phone and read to you. And it's the story of Ryan's graduation. And I preface it by saying that I don't think that I've ever once read the story without crying. So be forewarned. But even with that being said, I love this story so much because it really tells the story of again, this roller coaster that we ride, and that there can be a happy ending sometimes, most of the time. So I will begin. So tonight was my son Ryan's graduation, moving from junior high school to high school. They really make a big deal out of it for the kids, and rightly so. They are embarking on their last stop before the big graduation from grade 12. Ryan has FASD, and it seems like everything is harder for him. Friendships are harder. Social situations are definitely harder. The worst part of it is it takes him so long to get comfortable in new situations that they're often over before he does. The school was holding a dinner and dance for the kids today, and Ryan and I were planning to attend together. He seemed less than enthusiastic as we started to get ready. He wanted to wear jeans. I wanted him to wear dress pants. He told me his teacher told them that they could dress casually, so we compromised. He wore jeans, but with a smart-looking short-sleeved shirt instead of the t-shirt and hoodie that he had picked out for himself. He looked so handsome, and I was bursting with pride. Now, they say that the definition of disappointment is the difference between what we expect and what we get. I have learned that with Ryan, keeping my expectation open is the best way to avoid disappointment. Every once in a while, I don't heed my own advice, and this was to be one of those nights. I expected it to be magical. Why I expected it to be magical is more about me than about him. We scratch and claw our way to bring our children to their various milestones in life, and then without a doubt, we expect payment. We get to swell with pride as they step onto the threshold of being young ladies and gentlemen. When we arrived at the place where the dinner was being held, Ryan's mood became sullen. A group of boys from his class were gathering around together, laughing and talking excitedly. There was definitely a festive air in the room. Everyone was spit polished, from the parents to the teachers and the students, and the night definitely had magical potential. Ryan's mood remained sullen. As the girls fussed over each other and the boys laughed and poked good-natured fun at each other, the parents and teachers exchanged pleasant conversation about how big everyone was, where had the time gone, and how the day had turned out nice after all. I had no time for pleasantries. Ryan refusing to join his classmates became my focal point. No wonder he struggled with making friends. He did absolutely nothing to endear himself to these kids. Sure, no one was running over to greet us, but who would with the miserable look he had on his face? They told us to remain standing until the woman with the seating plan arrived. So Ryan and I stood there like two sore thumbs, barely speaking a word to each other. Everyone looks so nice, I said. He replied. 2-3 minutes of silence. Auntie Linda's not going to believe how big you are this summer. Again, Do you want to go talk to your friends? I said after a long, uncomfortable silence. No, Mom, he snapped. The plan was that the parents would remain for the dinner portion of the evening, and then they would leave while the kids had their dance. Only a few pre-appointed chaperones would remain. How would Ryan survive the evening alone without me? I would just have to take him home when I left. I knew it wouldn't be a problem. He wouldn't want to stay anyway. And so it went. Finally, the woman with the seating plan arrived, and we were assigned a spot at a table with the Hector family. Drake was the boy's name that was in Ryan's class. His mother, father, his grandmother, 2 of his brothers, and a friend who used to attend school with them but had moved away joined them at the table. The Hectors introduced themselves to me. Mr. Hector said, "Hey, Ryan, how's it going, buddy?" "Good," he replied, not lifting his eyes from his lap. I was smiling and talking to the people at the table, but inside I was screaming. I looked around the room and every table was alive with excitement. Ryan's mood was glaring in its contrast. I wanted to drag him outside. I wanted to make him smile and laugh with his friends. I didn't understand why he wanted to come here and then be so miserable. Surely he'd be happier in front of the TV, playing a video game or something. My anxiety was skyrocketing, and I could feel tears burning in my eyes. I was angry with him, and I was angrier with myself for being angry with him. I wanted to be the Hectors, exchanging pleasant dinner conversation. I wanted to be just about any other family at this function except my own. God bless dear Mr. Hector, who wouldn't be thwarted and continued to make conversation with my less than sociable son. Undaunted by Ryan's monosyllabic answers, he remained jovial and pleasant, and I continued to blink back tears. I wanted to cry, not just for myself, but also for Ryan. What kind of life would he have when the simplest of outings was so hard for him? We ate, and then we watched a PowerPoint presentation that the teachers had put together for the kids. I saw the slightest of smiles glance across Ryan's face when some of the photos of him played across the screen. I laughed out loud, hoping that it would be contagious, but his mood remained solemn. After the presentation and speeches, a book of memories was passed out to the kids along with a pen, and the kids began to run around like sharks in a feeding frenzy, getting each other to sign their books. One after another, they exchanged books and wrote all the traditional farewells to one another. I felt the bile rising in my throat. Ryan would be the kid going home with no signatures in his book. I felt sick. In my panic, it occurred to me to go around the room myself and get the kids to sign his book, explaining that Ryan wasn't feeling well and that we'd be going home very soon. Very cautiously, I leaned over and called to get his attention, and he glared at me. "Do you want to get some signatures for your book, buddy?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, and he stood up. My heart was surely going to stop. He started to walk across the room. He walked up to one kid and thrust the book at him with the you-know-what-to-do look on his face. And I held my breath. as the boy took it and signed it, and then handed his book to Ryan, who reciprocated, and on to the next. One by one, this brave little man went around and got almost everyone to sign his book. He looked uncomfortable at first, but he seemed to relax a bit. I watched from across the room as he looked at what they had written, a small smile forming across his face. I could see him counting in his head, counting the signatures in the book. He finally returned to the table and passed me the book to look at. I'll miss you, buddy. Thanks for all the laughs. It was all I could do not to choke with tears. I was almost hyperventilating at this point. Ryan looked at me and said, Mom, it's time for you to go. You can pick me up at 11. Are you going to be okay? I asked. Yeah, I'll be all right. I said, I'll have my phone with me if you need anything or if you need to be picked up early or anything like that. He said, no, it's okay. I'll be fine. And so I left, clutching his book of memories in my arms, and I prayed he'd be okay. I prayed that the kids would understand how hard these things were for him and to cut him a little bit of slack. About 3 hours later, I returned to the hall. I walked in and panned the room looking for Ryan. When I spotted him, he ran towards me. I had a million questions, but they could wait. Are you ready to go? I asked. Give me a minute. I got to say goodbye to some of my friends. And he disappeared. And he returned a few minutes later, and we headed towards the door. As soon as we got outside, he turned to me and smiled. Tonight was friggin' awesome, Mom. This was the best night I ever had. Wow, that's so cool, I said. He continued to tell me that although he didn't dance with any girls, he enjoyed the music, he sang along with his favorite songs, and even did some breakdancing with the other kids. On the way to the car, he said that he was sorry that he'd been so unhappy before, but that he finds situations like this very awkward. He said he always thinks that they aren't going to turn out good and that he'll be disappointed. I guess if he imagines it being a total bust, then there's less disappointment to deal with if things go wrong. And the anxiety that he was describing to me was palpable. He couldn't stop talking all the way home. He was asking me about music. Had I ever heard of Bob Seger, Bob Dylan? Did I like AC/DC? We were talking about AC/DC and what our favorite songs were. And I told him that I'd seen them in concert a couple of times. He reached over and turned on the radio. And at that precise moment, the AC/DC song Thunderstruck was starting. Ryan looked at me in amazement. What are the chances of that happening? He said. And I put up my hand for a high five. I can't stand high fives, but it felt right. And he slapped my hand. And we drove along digging the music. He was playing air guitar and I was singing away. I can't believe you know all the words, he said. And I thought my heart would explode. I guess the night turned out magical after all. I love this story because it really is kind of on a day in the life kind of level. It's indicative of what life with Ryan is like, you know, and I'd like to think that I am more enlightened than I was then, because that was a while ago. But I still struggle, and I still want to kind of push him to be a certain way in a certain timeline that suits me. And I try to be mindful of the fact that he marches in his own time, and he more often than not gets there in his own time, and that his timeline really has nothing to do with me. So anyways, thank you for listening to the story. Thank you for listening to me. We're about 5 minutes before the top of the hour. So maybe if, I don't know if anyone has any questions or something that they want to share, but I want to make sure that there's time for that if that's the case.
Thank you so much, Lori, for sharing your story with us today. It's always so powerful every time I hear you speak. And we do have some time, so if anybody does have questions, you're welcome to pop those questions into the chat. Megan and I will keep an eye on that. You also are welcome to unmute and turn your camera on if you're comfortable with that, and ask some questions. And just while people are doing that, I'm just going to say a couple quick closing remarks. So one is that there's a link in the chat to complete an evaluation survey. If you could please take a moment to do that, we really appreciate your input, and we look to that to plan future sessions. This was our last info series of a session. We're going to be taking a summer break and we'll resume again in the fall. So if you're not yet a member of the coalition, please complete the membership form and return it to the coordinators by email, which I will pop also into the chat so that you're kept in the loop of our sessions for the upcoming year. So, but if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to ask. There's a comment that just says, thank you for sharing, Lori.
Yeah, I saw it at the top of my screen.
I have a question.
Certainly.
I was just wondering, how long did you advocate for your son?
Well, I don't think that I've ever stopped. It just kind of looks different. You really have to be, for lack of a better word, forceful, because especially after 18, because you have to make sure that things are in place that allow you to do that. And as much as the system it tries to be user friendly for the people, it's not always the case. But I've always been a strong advocate for Ryan when it as far as like funding, when he was in school, when we would do the IEPs and apply for the funding. Ryan was funded as a level 2 funding when he was in school, which meant that he was funded for an aid half of the day, which to me was kind of like telling a person in a wheelchair that you can use your wheelchair 50% of the time. But the school that Ryan was in was a small school, and they were able to be very creative about, sort of identifying where the help was most needed in Ryan's day, and the parts of his day that were maybe a little easier for him, and maybe he didn't need someone there. So in school, the advocacy definitely took the form of communication with the school, but also advocacy includes educating family, educating the community that you live in, and helping people to understand the differences, and that the people amongst us, whether they're people that we're all neurodiverse in a variety of ways. And so I think advocacy isn't just with the system, like with schools or with medical or things like that, but also with advocacy takes the form of representing them within your own family, because there are kind of two camps of people that understand and people that don't understand. And so I've made it my business to kind of talk to the people who don't get it and help them to understand. I have a sister who was very much, interestingly, a sister that has no children of her own, that she didn't get it. She was like, well, if that was my kid, that wouldn't be happening, and that wouldn't be allowed, and so forth. And so she, all these years later, my sister that was of that mindset she's actually spoken to me many times where I would be venting or whining about something, and she'd say, hey, but wait a minute, what about this? And so she's actually gone over to the other camp of it. So it's important with advocacy that you not just frame that within the system, so to speak, and be mindful of advocacy takes the form of talking to family members, talking to people in your community, talking to people that are not professionals, and just making sure that people just calling this world that we live in to a better place and to a higher place, and in the way that we treat each other. You know, I think that form of advocacy is definitely important too. So I think that your question is shines a light on something that's super important, and thank you.
Thank you for that question and for that response, Lori. Any other questions? Well, it's 1 o'clock. I know some folks have to head off to their evening or afternoon commitments. So again, just thank you so much, Lori, for being here and for speaking with this group. And a reminder to everyone, we will reconvene again in the fall. So we wish you all a safe and happy summer, and we look forward to gathering again together after the summer break.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Take care, everyone.